alaikum, everyone. Today, our workshop slash panel, we're going to try to make it interactive, is on spreading the message of Imam Husain alayhi salam. And this workshop is sponsored by Stand with Dignity, which is one of many organizations that seek to propagate and spread the message of Imam Husain alayhi salam. Every year, Stand with Dignity gives out 2,000 red roses in Manhattan, along with a little message. And the purpose of this panel is to explore this and other methods of spreading the message of Imam Husain, specifically online. And we have a few things on our agenda, a few questions that we're going to get through. And the way we're going to structure this panel is I'm going to pose a question, and we're going to allow our speakers to respond briefly to this question. And then we're going to take questions from the audience about each question on the screen. And there are 5 questions total, so we're going to try to dedicate about between 10 and 15 minutes to each question. And then at the end, if there are any outstanding questions or issues that we haven't touched on, then inshallah we can take even more questions from the audience. So first, I'm going to let my esteemed panelists briefly introduce themselves, if you don't mind, starting with Reverend John Shuck and just moving down the line.
Assalamu alaikum. It is really a joy and an honor to be here at the Ummah conference. I'm humbled by the resources spent to bring me here to be with you, and I don't take that lightly at all. It is really truly an honor to be here. I am a minister, a Presbyterian pastor in Portland, Oregon, Beaverton, Oregon, at Southminster Presbyterian Church. I've been one for about 27 years, serving 4 different congregations. I'm also a radio show host. For 7 years, I've hosted a weekly radio program called Progressive Spirit. And then more recently, I have a once-a-month show on KBOO in Portland. And it's in the context of that I was able to go to Iraq for Arba'in in 2018, courtesy of the Husseiniya Islamic Society of Seattle and Zara Abadi, with the forward vision of bringing people, non-Christians, non-Shia Muslims, to Iraq to experience that and bring it back. And what I did is I ended up going and bringing back a 29-minute documentary. It's called For the Love of Hussein, and you can find that on YouTube. And so it was a transformative experience for me, and so I'm very happy to talk about that.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Kashif Haider. I'm a gastroenterologist by profession and live in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. It's an honor to be here talking about Imam Husain alayhi salam. You know, that is our passion. Everybody who's here, you know, Karbala, Ashura, Imam Husain, this is what keeps us alive. So similarly, I have had a chance about 6 years ago to go to Iraq for ziyarat. And that did something. You know, I'm sure everybody has that experience here. You fell in love with Karbala. You never want to leave. In the same token, we wanted to do something actually to help the people who go for the ziyarat. So I have been involved. I had an opportunity to get involved in a hospital project in Karbala, Imam al-Hujjah Hospital. I've been involved with that for the last 6 years. Other than doing the medical work in Karbala, there is another beautiful opportunity which happened, and that's why I'm here talking to you. In this whole experience, I have opportunity to take some non-Shias and non-Muslims to Karbala with me. And that was the most wonderful experience I had. I will share some story. There was a non-Shia Pakistani physician who wanted to come with me. And I was a little bit confused initially that why does he want to come with me? But when I saw him, his reaction to visiting the shrine of Imam Husain alayhi salam, it really shook me. It opened my eyes. And then I also had an opportunity to take the CEO of the hospital where I work at in Kentucky with me, Dr. Steve Toadwine, who's also a physician. And his wife, who is actually a cancer patient, she has metastatic lung cancer. And when they expressed this desire to come with me to Karbala, I was really confused initially. Why would they want to go? And I had a talk with them, and I told them, Steve, it's okay that you want to come with me, but I'm not sure Anne should come with us because she's sick and she's on chemotherapy. But she told me something which really impressed me. She said, she has metastatic cancer. She shouldn't have been alive. But every day that she wakes up is a gift from God. And she will stop her chemotherapy 2 weeks before she was ready to go to Karbala, so she doesn't have any complication when she's there. So after these experiences, I really would like to explore the possibility to open Karbala to everybody. We should have a way, just like the pastor went there, and these two friends who went with me. I don't know why we should limit Karbala to the Shias only. Imam Husain belongs to Allah, and everything which is Allah's is Imam Husain's. We should open this up to everybody. And we don't have to do anything. When something is beautiful, everybody appreciates the beauty. Imam Husain will do the job himself. We just have to open the doors for people.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Yassir Haider. I am an orthopedic surgeon in Toronto, and that's my professional accolade. But I am involved with Imam al-Hujjah Hospital, like Kashif is, and I want to help with this project of taking some non-Shias to Karbala. But I'll say one thing. What we have, nobody has. The message we have, nobody has. But we are like a blind guy selling sunglasses. We ourselves are the biggest problem. We have limited Imam Husain just for Shias. And you would not believe how much love there is among the non-Shias and some of the non-Muslims about Imam Husain. There are some questions I'm sure we'll talk about in the next discussions. But the new age, the digital media, combined with the ziyarat of Imam Husain, can change this whole world. And I'll briefly say this, that whatever happened in the history, right from the Waqai Karbala, right from these Hastis walking from there to Sham and then back to Medina, but back to Sham and get buried there. And you look at these stars spread all around, why, how, what's the geopolitical ramification, what's going on nowadays. These countries would not have survived if it wasn't for them. So our role is combine digital media, latest technology, with this powerful message which nobody has. It becomes a mix which nobody can resist. Thank you so much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullah, everyone. It's quite telling that we have such a jam-packed room, mashallah, for this topic. Let me start off by saying that when you look at the small army of Imam al-Husain, you see a group of people united only around their loyalty to Imam al-Husain, because in every other aspect of their lives, they could have come from completely different places. You cannot make this up, brothers and sisters. You had an army made up of slaves and tribal chiefs and slave owners and peasants and the poor and the wealthy and the white and the black and everyone in between. It is incredible how this tiny gang of people also included amongst them Christians, Christians who were not very common in the Arabian Peninsula, in Iraq. And the mere fact that you had people there who saw a mirror reflection of Jesus in Imam al-Husain. Everything they've been told about Jesus, all the noble virtues of this great messenger of God, were epitomized in Imam al-Husain, the same person who's connected directly to all previous divine messengers and apostles. And so the variegated nature of the army of Imam al-Husain, if we can even call it that, the incredible mosaic of different people and backgrounds and ethnicities and creeds and colors that all came together in a show of loyalty, the like of which history has never witnessed, should be a guiding principle and an inspiration for all of us to understand. And I echo the words of the co-panelists that I have here, I'm blessed to be with, that Imam al-Husain has a universal message and a universal appeal and a flavor that everyone will gravitate to. The ziyarah of Imam al-Husain on the 15th of Sha'ban says, Ashhadu annaka. And the ziyarah on the 15th of Sha'ban is one of those visitations that's not about the virtues of Imam al-Husain. It's almost like a military salute. It's very short, it's to the point. And it says, Ashhadu annaka, I bear witness, qutilta walam tamut. You were killed, but you never died. بل برجاء حياتك حيت قلوب شيعتك. In fact, it was the radiant, pulsating energy that emanated from your presence and your martyrdom that continues to give life to us as human beings. And if we can somehow tap into that source of infinite energy, if we can somehow try and seek inspiration from that, we could truly transform the world, brothers and sisters. The closest resemblance to peace on earth is Ziyaratul Arba'in. The closest resemblance to people of different backgrounds and ethnicities coming together in the love of something bigger than them, offering everything they have for total strangers, is Ziyaratul Arba'in. And that's one tiny aspect of the Imam, his ziyarah, which has transformed the region now in a phenomenon called Arba'in. Imagine what we could do with the rest of the teachings and moral examples of Imam al-Husain. And that should be our goal, inshallah. Thank you.
They told me that near heaven can be seen. So why was I denied the ziyarah of Arba'in? My tears in silence are now calling out Hussein. My tears in silence are now calling out Hussein. Salawat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ali Al-Hadi. I am a singer-songwriter and music producer. I am the head of a record label and production company, multimedia production company called The Awaited Group, and I will inshallah join you today with the more multimedia kind of opinion on this topic.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for those opening remarks. And you know, this is the conference of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, and we might be thinking to ourselves, oh, you know, Muharram is still 2 months away. Why are we already talking about Imam Husain? And I think one of the most common questions that people have in Muharram, and one of the most common issues that people experience, is an inability to emotionally connect with the story of Imam Husain. You know, you get to Ashura and you're like, well, why am I not crying? Why do I not feel it this year? And it's difficult to feel for someone who you don't have a connection to and who you aren't thinking about and don't have sort of an ongoing correspondence with throughout the year. If you skip to the end of a novel when there is the tragic death of a character, you're likely not going to be affected by that by that tragic ending, unless you've read the entirety of the novel, you've gotten in touch with the character's character, his or her personality, why it is that their end was so tragic. So I think it's really important for us to be speaking about the message of Imam Husain, and I think one of the most important aspects of this is keeping an ongoing correspondence with the Imam alayhi salam and with his story and his character throughout the year, so that when Ashura does come around, we don't feel the need to reconnect with Imam Husain. We just feel the weight of his tragedy. So with that being said, I'm going to begin with the questions now. And the first question I have is that social media and the internet more broadly can pose great dangers in our communities. We all know sort of the negative effects of social media, too much time on social media, and the effect this can have on our attention spans, our brains. Is the best solution to create alternative content like that of the message of the Imams alayhimus salam, or should we instead push for a move away from these platforms in favor of deeper social and intellectual connections? Should we avoid dealing with complex or nuanced topics on online platforms where things can easily be misconstrued? Please.
So I think that the dangers of social media are widely documented. It's not only Muslims who are complaining about the negative side effects of a social media addiction and other dangers that lurk in cyberspace. And I think if we're going to stick our heads in the sand and hope that our communities don't get sucked into social media, that's also a mistake, because whether we like it or not, it's out there. It's one of the means by which people not only communicate but receive the bulk of their information, mostly in the form of memes and emojis. And it is what it is, right? It's a reality that we have to grapple with. And I think the best approach really is to take an offensive approach as opposed to a defensive one, meaning that, I mean, you know, I've been involved in social media for quite some time now, and I feel that a lot of youth resort to social media for religious guidance, and I think there's a space for that, right? Just like, you know, demonic terror groups like ISIS is able to use social media to recruit fighters and groom people from far-flung places, even convert non-Muslims into their demented version of Islam through Twitter direct messages. I'm sure we could use the same tool to spread the message of Imam Husain. It's just more tricky because with a demonic terror group like ISIS, you're talking about a group of people who are highly trained, highly refined, message that is delivered using social media. Whereas the vast majority of Shia Muslims and followers of Imam Husain are not that well versed, and so that means that they will have to really educate themselves prior to taking to social media in order to spread the message of Imam Husain. And so my suggestion to people is, if you have to be on social media to serve a specific need, whether it be communication or news bites or whatever, that's fine. But if you want to spread the message of Imam Husain, you really need to dig a little deeper than a YouTube video or a Facebook post or what have you. You really need to educate yourselves by reading books, by researching, by actually doing the groundwork before you're able to become an evangelist for Imam al-Hussein. But until then, we should be in damage control and try to limit negative exposure and addiction and whatnot, because it is very easy to spread misinformation on social media. It happens all the time. It happens in politics, and it definitely happens in the world of religion as well. So it is proceed with caution. That would be my message.
I just think, what would our Imam do if they had the same opportunity in the same era? And if we can't figure that out, then you look at the representatives of imams. And like Sayyid said, right now, Sayyid Sistani has his website. There are other ulama who are using this website. So I personally think, this is my own view, that it's more good than bad. As they say nowadays, if you want to call your kids, just pull the plug on Wi-Fi. It has the power. You can't deny it. And I personally think that Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam would have actually established a university or a school or a college to understand the social media and the power of media and how to use it. There's a very famous Coca-Cola advert which is known to be the most successful advert in the history of advertising. And they call it the hilltop moment. This is when, at the time, the CEO of Coca-Cola, this is early 70s, was traveling to Ireland. Their flight got diverted. And they ended up in another airport with all these fellow passengers. And it was hot and there was no AC at the time. What they did, they served Coca-Cola. And then it came to his mind that there are diverse people from all over the world who are sitting here drinking Coke and chatting with each other. They don't know each other, but they are talking to each other and mingling. So from there he had this idea of producing this advert which ran in one of the Super Bowls here in US in 1970s, in which there were this bunch of people from different races and colors, which in those days in 1970s was very unusual for a company like Coca-Cola to think about it. So when they did produce that ad, it became that lot of different color, young, old people sitting together and producing that moment. I think right now we have this opportunity to get this message right, but with professionalism. We have people among ourselves, among Shia youths, I know they are high up in Google and in the social media companies. And we had this conversation in Toronto in our Bathurst Imam Bara. He came and gave a lecture to us and said, you don't understand social media. Social media has become a science. You need to deal it with like a science. And I think Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam would have dealt it like a science.
I would like to add a few words to what the Sayyid and the brother said regarding something that's, now we're looking at it in any, like in kind of form objectively, but without the subjective point, the objective is actually blind. We need an expert in that area. I'm just going to give a regular example. A lot of people go to the gym and they work out, but they don't know what they're doing. But when they get a personal trainer, things move. And this is the exact same thing when it comes to social media, for example. We need experts. We need people who understand that world, combined with the knowledge we have from our respected scholars. And I think in that way we can send the pure, real, genuine message of Imam Husain through social media. And I'm a big supporter of social media. I think it's a great opportunity, it's a great tool that we can use to spread peace and wisdom.
Are there any questions from the audience about this question before we move on? Yes. Did you hear the question? So creating different content for different age groups and demographics and being able to target select audiences as a part of this endeavor.
So I'll say a few words there. So I think we need to distinguish between an institutionalized campaign on social media and the individual end user responsibility. right? So when we speak to an audience of people who are, admirers and followers of Imam al-Husayn and the Ahlul Bayt, then what we're doing essentially is encouraging them to have a more active role in social media as opposed to becoming, passive consumers of social media. And so essentially putting the responsibility on the shoulders of every single individual who is on social media to contribute, to engage, to write posts, to try and become creative and come up with catchy means of spreading the message of Imam al-Husayn. And that's something that's available to everyone, and it doesn't really have to have the sort of specialized skills that you're talking about. Anybody, wherever they may be, whether it be, if they're active on Snapchat, then obviously they know how to use the medium. If they're active on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, each one has its own unique characteristics, and you know better what to do. And I guess we should trust the end user to come up with creative ways of trying to spread the message of the Imam and spread awareness about the Imam. I'll give you a quick example. Across the world, we have what is traditionally called julus on the day of Ashura or around the 10th of Muharram. So it's a procession, people come out, and it's a condemnation of Yazid and his attributes, and it's also sort of a means of drawing attention toward Imam al-Husayn and his legacy in an atmosphere, in an ambiance that is largely non-Muslim. In the UK, in Manchester specifically, a couple of years ago, they decided to become a little more creative and find out how to refine this julus, because julus most of the times is very traditional, has a distinctly foreign flavor. But these guys said, you know what, if we're going to tap into the British market, then we need to refine our message. So what they did was they hired a PR agency, an advertising agency, and they gave them all the literature they had about Imam Husayn, and they said, could you come up with some kind of a campaign strategy for us? And what they did, I think, was nothing short of genius. They ended up holding a julus where it was a silent funeral, and they had a horse carriage with a hearse, and everyone was wearing those old British caps, and everyone behind them was completely silent. They weren't doing matam or anything like that, and they walked behind the hearse as though it was a royal funeral. And the feedback they got was absolutely incredible. People were stopping saying, who's the member of the royal family with about 50,000 people marching behind them that we never heard about on BBC or Sky News? And so I think we can trust individuals and organizations to try and become a little creative when it comes to refining the message of Imam al-Husayn. But if what you're talking about is having an institution that specifically caters to this market, and I think that's where you need more professionals involved and you need experts in the field and whatnot. Or you could just do what I did, which is befriend J.K. Rowling, God bless her, good friend of mine, on Twitter, and as an influencer with something like, 15 million followers or something, suddenly I see one of my posts absolutely exploding, like 500,000 shares and whatever, and it turns out that the one and only J.K. Rowling was the one who retweeted it. So you could always do that. He's a big supporter of Imam al-Husayn, by the way.
I think just for the sake of time, we'll move on now to our second question. And there's overlap with some of these issues, and we can talk about them more, inshallah, at the end. So the second question I want to pose is, both Western groups and Muslims from different communities often post images and videos of sharing Muslim devotion during Ashura to propagate a certain image of the sharing Muslim community. How do we deal with and address expressions of devotion to the Ahl al-Bayt that may be seen as extreme or backwards to outside audiences? What is right or wrong and should be denounced as such? How can we have these conversations internally without causing disunity and disagreement within the community? And what image should we seek to project outside of our community?
I'll be very brief. I'll just give you an example that when we started having social media explode in last 10, 15 years, before that, I being an orthopedic surgeon, I used to do knee replacements, hip replacements, quite gory surgeries, a lot of blood and splatter and saws and drills and all that stuff going on. And it used to be just for a few eyes, just for the surgeon and the nurses and the OR staff to see. Patients would just go in, go to sleep, come out with a bandage on their knee. But now, thanks to YouTube and the social media, patients come to us, and there are two types of patients. One who are on our list, they see the surgery, they freak out, and they call and cancel their surgeries. But there's unbelievable large group of patients who actually come way more prepared than they used to be in the past, with a lot more relevant questions than non-relevant questions. So the message is that don't worry about what the fake news or the people who have bad intentions show about Matam or Zanjir or blood and splatter and all that. Whether you disagree with it or agree with it, that's a different discussion. But to me, I think, like Syed said very nicely, that people in Manchester adapted to their local scenario. And things are already changing. You don't need to help a person who is already on its way out. So there are some old traditions which are on their way out. Social media showing these images are raising questions in the minds of Shias and non-Shias, which to me is good. This platform of media used to be the domain of only few. BBC, CNN, rich guys who could only own billions of dollars of firms, and you and I had no say. Now, it is democratized, but don't take it for granted. It's not going to last very long, because they are already thinking of how to clamp down on this and how to control it, how to win elections through it, how to change the regimes, and so on. So be careful, know about it. It's not as simple as going on Facebook and Twitter and so on. But, sorry, I spoke too long, but basically don't be afraid of these images they're showing about the Shias. I think there will be good coming out of this.
I want to add to what the Sayyid and the brother said regarding responsibility. Responsibility is very important, and each individual has a responsibility when it comes to social media. And I want to quote Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Don't believe in everything you read on the internet." So just be careful, you know, with the pictures that's out there, like, and stuff. And don't be a person who. Yeah, it was. But don't be one of those who just, you know, retweets or shares whatever there is out there just for the sake of Imam Husain. We understand. I believe in your intention. It's pure, it's nice, it's beautiful, but be smart. Use your brain and just be careful and be responsible.
I would just add to this question, or have a follow-up question, because I feel like there are two ways that the reaction can be. You know, we can say, oh, this is fake news, or just ignore it, or it'll fizzle out eventually, or this is a minority thing. But the counter to that is that in many communities, it's actually very common. And this issue is something that Shia communities in the US and abroad often split over. You know, how to react to these things, whether or not there should be these practices in the masjid, or whether or not they have a place within the tradition, etc. And, you know, on the one hand, we want to say, you know, regarding many things, we don't want to just completely adopt Western standards and say that certain things are backwards just because they don't conform to certain Western conceptions of how grief should be expressed, or how emotions can be dealt with. So that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, these things really can serve to drive people away from the underlying message of Imam Husain. So if, for example, we see these images online, or if someone approaches us and asks, what is sort of the status of these practices, what should be the response of responsible, educated Muslims who are seeking to propagate the message of Imam Husain but don't want to either drive people away or, be dishonest about the place of these practices?
Yeah, looks like I'm the icebreaker.
You're the most qualified.
No, I'm not. I will say this. If you Google Ashura or Muharram or Imam Hussein in Google Images, you will end up seeing a lot of very gory pictures. In fact, I remember once I did this experiment where I scrolled all the way down to the bottom of the page and it was just nothing but those pictures. And then I went to the second page and it was exactly the same. And the third page, and then at some point I just gave up. So whether it's the algorithm that's doing it or the frequency of the people looking at those images or videos, I don't know. What I do know is this, that if someone approached me and said, why is it that you do this to yourselves, it's self-flagellation, it's disgusting, it's gory. What I will say is, look, we represent a worldwide community of over 300 million people. And a tiny, tiny minority of people practice these forms of mourning for Imam Hussein. And you can debate them on whether it's right or wrong, but at the end of the day, it's a tiny minority. We can see this in our own communities, right? You see a mosque where 7,000, 8,000 people attend that mosque, and on the day of Ashura, when they have the zanjir and they have the tatbir, there's 50 people doing it, or 100 people. So percentage-wise, it's a tiny group of people. But of course the Daily Mail is going to try and focus on that instead of the positive message of Imam al-Hussein. Of course some of these ultra-conservative, far-right media groups are going to try and highlight these aspects of the mourning rituals of Imam al-Hussein as opposed to the very positive message of Arba'een, for example. I remember I was in London one year, and they had this massive procession. By the time I arrived at the scene, the police had counted the number of participants, and they said that it's over 30,000. By the time we got it on, it was around 45 or 50,000 people. Marble Arch was filled to the brim. And I remember saying, you know what, how about a little chant here today? Where is the BBC? Where is Sky News? Where is all the other media outlets focusing on this, the beautiful positive images of men, women, and children carrying placards against ISIS and terrorism and whatnot, and holding their heads high in pride as followers of the one who fed and quenched the thirst of his own enemies, Imam al-Hussein. But of course they're going to go to the tiny minority and focus on them. So you know what? I couldn't care less what the media wants to focus on. I will do my bit. I will spread the message of Imam al-Hussein. And as the dear doctor mentioned, that we need to customize the message in accordance with the environment around us. Ayatullah al-Uzma al-Na'ini, the teacher of Sayyid al-Khoi and other luminaries, famously says that each culture should commemorate Imam al-Hussein in their own way. And so I see it's beautiful that in Oslo, Norway, they give out hot chocolate in the middle of the street. I think it's beautiful, because it's cold over there, right? So, and I think it's beautiful that if you go to other places, they give you cold saffron drinks in some parts of Iraq or Iran. So commemorate it in your own way. Be mindful of how people may interpret or misinterpret the message, but do the positive message, and who cares what the others say.
Thank you very much, Sayyid. This is beautiful, what you said. I just want to say one thing, and that is that in this, I fully understand what you're saying, sister, about those images. We've all seen them, and we're all concerned about that. But also, in a wave of trying to condemn that, let's not kill the passion for Imam Husain in our own community. Each one of us, one of the main reasons we are Muslims, we exist, is because of our passion and our love for Imam Husain. So, the passion is important. How, just like the Sayyid said, the way we express that passion has to change with time and the location we are in.
Yes, please. No, absolutely. And I completely agree that expressions of grief can vary culture to culture, and we should not impose our understandings of how grief should be expressed, which have emerged in a very particular context over many years, subliminally by all the messages and signals that we absorb from the society we live in, onto something that originated in a very different time and space. I'll let you.
I just want to add
Add
one
your
thing,
comment.
as I've done the last 3 times now. When we talk about responsibility and what the media says and so what, of course, I mentioned before the responsibility. In 2011 till 2014 and still to today, in Syria there is a war going on. And a lot of people fought in that war, Lebanese people, Afghanis, and whatsoever. And the media was only talking about rebels and the government, but we as Shia, we are identified with Sayyidah Zainab. So in that period, no one spoke about how we as individuals in the West could fight for the right to have a shrine for Sayyidah Zainab, for example. So a group of people called me and they said, can you write a song about Sayyidah Zainab? And I did that, and we discussed like a long-term topic, and we created a music video, a nasheed video called My Beloved, and it in Arabic talks about the followers' relationship with the Sayyidah Zainab. And in the video, it starts by, and if you watch it, you can go watch it on YouTube. If you write My Beloved Ali Al-Hadi, you will find it. It will show you 5 guys who are like training and ready to go and fight. And in the end, they take out a paper saying, we are all your Abbas, O Zainab. Like we can defend, we can fight with the pen. So you should, and I should, and everyone should do that. We have the opportunity through social media to fight, to show the world the real picture, the beautiful picture of Imam Husain and Ahlul Bayt. We should go and do that.
Thank you so much. Yes. No, that's fine. Are they brief questions? Okay. Why don't you both ask, and then we'll let them respond, and then move on, inshallah.
There we go. The first thing I'll say is that I went to Arba'in and I didn't see any of those things. I saw all positive images. And so when people ask me about that, and they do, because my own community is very, is influenced like all of us by Islamophobia and media. And I'd love to talk about that. But, so I just say that wasn't real in terms of my own experience. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just meant that that's a minority view or view that some people have, and that's up to the Shias to decide how they're going to do that. Yeah, sure. Oh my gosh, I'm embarrassed by Christians all the time. I mean, but you just say it, people are people, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what you are about. I think when people use those kinds of arguments, they just want to put something down, and you just say, well, as I heard yesterday, if you think I'm a Christian, don't ask me, ask my neighbor. The aspect of being that I try not to do a whole lot of criticism of other faith groups, or including my own, unless it really is against the various principles that I have. And speaking in tongues is not. My mother spoke in tongues. I've developed with that. I grew up in that tradition. So, and actually it's quite a beautiful one in many respects. So I think that there are many positive ways to approach God.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
And
There was another question?
yes,
Growing up in New York, we used to go to the Ashura Juice in Manhattan, and at times, when we were younger, we would kind of feel awkward because we shirts and doing matam, and this is on, on Fifth Avenue. And a lot of non-Muslims are watching this. So I know it's not social media, but then here you're live demonstrating your religion in public, where I don't think they would understand. When you see people chanting in a different language, beating themselves, taking out their shirts, it's kind of contradictory to what Islam is. And so I wanted you to comment on that.
I think Sayyid is the most to answer these questions. Sayyidna.
Go for it. I got you. I got your back.
Well, I do recitations in Muharram as well, and I usually do it for the communities that are engaged or believes in that, and I've rarely seen any other people coming attending to, for example, Latum Nohe. I'm going to talk about my personal view. The Islamic view is like I believe in the freedom to practice and do whatever you want, but when it comes to what I believe in personally, I don't believe it's the best idea to, as an individual in the West, go out on the street and practice these things. You can do them in a Husainiyah. And the Sayyid, he gave a really good example with the Manchester thing. And he said that was, for example, an idea onto how to kind of engage in those things. So I think that way is the better way, producing some media stuff, producing something that can get the message out in the more like righteous way or more fine way that for example a Western person will understand it. And of course we should keep what we have of traditions in Muharram, the right traditions. Am I wrong saying?
No comment. No, you're not wrong. I will say this, that we believe in individual freedom and liberty. And that means, we always talk about the verse in the Quran, La ikraha fid din. There's no compulsion in religion. And I think there's definitely no compulsion in how you should mourn Imam Husain, right? I think anyone is more than capable of deciding for themselves how they wish to express their grief for arguably the greatest tragedy history has ever seen. But my point is that if you think there's a practice that's counterproductive, for example, focus on the productive practices that you think will work. In this day and age, producing documentaries, for example, is an excellent way to draw people's attention to your cause. Because let's face it, if you post a video on YouTube and it's successful and it spreads, then you can expect to, probably not a documentary about Imam Husain. It's not going to get that sort of viewership. But if it's K-pop or something, then you can expect like tens of millions of views overnight, which is stupid. Or those makeup videos, which somehow, I honestly don't get it. How are they so popular? Or like I always talk about how people like the Kardashians are famous for being famous. Like I can't figure out for the life of me, what is it about them that's so appealing? But anyway, I'm not judging. What I'm saying is, you have to you have to carve your own niche. There's a beautiful hadith in Kitab al-Khisal by Shaykh al-Saduq, which is a highly recommended read for people who want to start off reading, original traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. Kitab al-Khisal, by the way, translated into English. There's a hadith in it which says that our followers will always have a minimum of one of these attributes. And the Imam mentions three. He says they are either physically beautiful, or they sound beautiful, they have a beautiful voice. I'm looking at you right here. Or they're highly intelligent and eloquent and smart, right? So no matter who you are, you at least have one of those qualities. And you're able to use the skills that you have, the gifts that you have, in order to bring attention to the message of Imam al-Husain. Don't listen to the negativity. Don't be bothered by the people who are trying to find some flaw or another to paint you and your message and that of Imam Husain in a negative light. There's a video on YouTube, which I found amusing, where this guy, he's a YouTuber, goes around, does interviews on the street. And so one day, it's an old video, I think goes back to about 10 years or so. There's a protest on the street in Manhattan of Jewish men and women who are holding pictures of babies who have had their heads cut for Ashura, right? Which, by the way, is a practice that I have never seen. And I've lived across the Muslim world. I have been engaged in this. I mean, I do this for a living, and I've never seen this happen to a baby. Does it happen somewhere around the world? I'm sure it does, right? People do all kinds of things. So they were holding these pictures, protesting on the street, saying, if this is what they do to their own kids, imagine what they do to us. What's funny is that this guy walks up to one of these ladies and he says, hey lady, I'm a Jew, and I got a question for you. Is this barbaric? She said, of course it is. Look at the baby. The baby had no say. The baby never decided to have their heads cut like this. And of course it's barbaric. It's vicious, it's vile, it's grotesque, and all the other adjectives. And he's like, oh, is it? Because I'm a Jew and I was circumcised, and I don't remember anyone asking me whether I give my consent for that. So if that's barbaric, my point is this. Everybody has some dirty laundry. Everybody, like I was at a church in Auckland, New Zealand just last month, and the priest, he's like, you know what? People are talking about how Islam has verses in the Quran that are violent. I can tell you there are stories in the Bible that I'm ashamed to even mention. We're talking about prophets who say, God, could you please kill everybody, including the animals, the cattle, the children, and everyone. So everybody has things in their culture which are either outright, not acceptable or civilized, or they're difficult for other people to understand. Do not be demoralized by the negativity. Do your bit and board the ark of salvation of Imam al-Husain alayhi salam. He's called Safinatun Najat. Board the ark of Imam al-Husain. Contribute to his cause in some way or another, whether it be a vlog or a podcast or an article or a vlog or anything it is, and don't worry about everyone else.
I'll just say one thing which is kind of more medical related, that in London, England, in Tooting, in the Dar Jafria, there used to be a lot of Zanjir Zani, and as the time passed, there was a conflict. And then the public health came in. And because there's a lot of blood and there's a lot of people touching blood, then it became a medical issue because you are looking at hepatitis, you're looking at all the blood-borne infections and so on and so forth. So I think people in the West don't really, especially us Shias, have to worry about it. This thing in general will transform, and that reminds me of at the time when we are from Gujarat, Pakistan, and we used to have a big jalous every Muharram. And then all of a sudden this, after the revolution and we got inspired and we said, you know what, this whole Ashura is about saving Islam. And this Zohar Asr time goes by, people still keep doing matam, nobody reads namaz. So we're going to stop the jalous and we're going to start doing the prayer on the road. The biggest opposition came from the people who used to do zanjeers, because obviously it was hard for them to do the wuzu, and they had blood all over them. But eventually we just persevered. First time it was a challenge, but then everybody knew the truth and the fact that, this is the prayer and this is what Imam Husain, at the time of Asr, this is Ashura day, and you are not willing to read namaz. So all these people, they actually got subdued generally, and they just fizzled away. So you do your thing like everybody's saying. But from medical standpoint, these things are on their way out, even if they are minority.
I just want to say one last thing, because it might have sounded that I'm against doing matam on the street. I'm not. It's up to people what they want to do. I just believe that I would be able to deliver a more beautiful, a more decent message, and more powerful message through, for example, media. But again, it depends on who I'm dealing with.
Especially no need to take the shirt off. You can do matam.
Please repeat that. Please, I beg you.
Can I make a comment here? You know, many of us are from Indian Pakistani subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. And you know, our ancestors, majority of them who were Shia came from Iran. And this is nothing new. You know, they took the local tradition, the local language. They produced poets like Mir Anis and Dabir. You know, when I was in 10th grade, not because I was Shia, every kid in the class studied, when they studied Urdu literature, they studied the Marsiya of Mir Anis, which was about Karbala. So we need to, if we are in the West, there is a reason we are here. We need to produce the literature at the same level that in Urdu poetry, you know, Ashura, Sham-e Ghariba, these are istaras that are used in the poetry. We need to do that. Without doing this, you know, this will not change. Where is our poets? Why are all our kids are becoming physicians and engineers and lawyers? We need them to be in the social sciences. This is what impacts the society. We need them to be artists within the realm of Islamic, you know, traditions. But this is what we need. That's when we'll be part of this Western culture and change things. And Imam Husain and remembrance of Imam Husain will be in India. India is not a Muslim country. Ashura is a national holiday. Why? This is because of the contribution of our ancestors. So this is what we need to do here.
Can I want to also, I think part of that issue also is sort of the dichotomy now that we have between people who are doctors or physicians and then people who are poets or people who are intellectuals or people who are scholars. You know, in the medieval period, this distinction wasn't so sharp. There was no such thing as someone who was a doctor and he was just a doctor and he was nothing else and that was his whole life and he didn't do anything. I mean, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq is the prime example of this. He was a learned man, a scholar, a reader, a writer, and also a prominent scientist and a prominent physician and all these things. So I think now we take our profession and we make that our identity and we behave as though we cannot foster other skills and become experts in other things and become well versed in literature just because our lives are so, our livelihood comes from our scientific professions. So I think this is another thing that needs to change is our attitude, our compartmentalization of professions. And I just want to say one last thing regarding your question, and my esteemed panelists have said many pertinent things to this question, but regarding, and I'm not talking now about Zanjir or about, you know, people whose blood is flowing into the streets, but on a very simple level, matam, the beating of chests, or even men who get very into it, and I don't know why they take their shirts off, but they may take their shirts off. I just want to ask a question. So there are many studies that say that prayer is very beneficial for the body, that many of the motions of prayer mimic beneficial positions, etc. But if a study were to come out tomorrow that told us prayer is actually really bad for your knees, doing sujood is terrible for your knees, it messes up your knees, what would we do? Would we stop praying? The point that I'm trying to make is that there are many practices that may not be beneficial for our physical health, like the beating of the chest. You know, people are like, oh, why would you inflict pain on your chest? These people, their chests are bright red. Why are they doing this? But then there are so many things that people partake in society that put a toll on their bodies that we don't think twice about. You know, like people go to all-night raves and party all night and drink alcohol and do all these things, and we sort of think of this as leisurely. But then if someone lets out their passion and their sort of inner vigor on something like matam, we're like, oh, this is backwards. So we might want to also examine our underlying assumptions about what kind of self-harm we perceive as acceptable because of the society we live in and because of the things we've internalized. And maybe examine if we have double standards regarding Western versus Eastern practices. And I call this sort of like internalized Orientalism, where we see things that originate in the East as harmful, and then we sort of give a free pass for things that have just become normal because of all the things we consume in the West. So that's just another thing I want to keep in mind. And again, I'm not justifying extreme manifestations of this, but you know, if people are getting really into matam and people are jumping and they're beating their chests and they're doing it passionately, you know what? At least that passion is channeled towards Imam Husain. It's better than that passion being channeled elsewhere.
If anyone asks you why you're beating your chest, you should reply. I would reply, I am beating my chest to ease the pain. That's my autistic reply. If anyone says, why are you beating your chest? I'm beating my chest to ease the pain.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I think I have to respond to this as an orthopedic surgeon. My specialty is knee replacement. And I can tell you this, that this study which sister was talking about, actually the first study which was carried out was actually in Middle East. And they were blaming the sitting position during the prayer on the floor, like in Tashhad. But you know, most of these studies which are being carried out, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. Because one of the biggest factor of having a knee osteoarthritis, either having it or getting it worse, is overweight, not sitting on the floor. So can you imagine the Arabs in Saudi Arabia or in Dubai? They are not the best of the examples in terms of the BMI and body shape and so on and so forth. And I can scientifically tell you that 1 pound gain in your body weight is equal to 4 pounds on your knees. So you go and figure it out. How did they figure this out, that this population has got knee arthritis or knee got worse because of praying and not the overweight? You have to look at that study, and they did not pick up the difference whether they were overweight or not overweight. So I think we shouldn't worry about these things. What our AIMA are, if this was such a bad thing, our AIMA would have put the limit on sitting on the floor, or you should not be sitting on the floor after, because if they were the best of the creation and with the best of the knowledge, they would have said it. So I think we should ignore these type of silly things, because we are lucky to have these guides in our life. We don't have to worry about the studies. You just worry about what Imam said.
Thank you very much. There is so much more we could talk about regarding these issues, but I'm going to move it on because we are running out of time. So my third question, and inshallah we can get through all 5 questions, is during Muharram, people often use sayings of Western figures and intellectuals to show that Imam Husain's message is universal. What does this indicate about how our communities seek to legitimize aspects of our identities? And how do we spread the message of Imam Husain on its own terms? Can you pass the mic to Reverend Shuck, please?
This is the question I wanted to address a bit, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes. I want to share something with you. People ask me all the time, what did this experience of going to Arba'in mean to you? And so I wrote a piece for the local paper that we have, Beaverton Resource Guide, all right? It competes with the New York Times. Anyway, and 250 words. They asked me to write a column every now and then of something positive, and so I wrote about my experience. So this is Arba'in from me, 250 words. Last October, I had the honor of participating in the largest annual peaceful human gathering on earth. It's called Arba'in. During a 2-week period, 15 million people, some estimates are as high as 20 to 30 million, visit the shrine of Imam Husain, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, in Karbala, Iraq.
People walk from Najaf to Karbala, a 50-mile walk, and have all their needs met: food, water, a place to sleep at night, anything they might need to make a successful visit. I came as a Christian pastor from America to show my respect for Husain and for his sacrifice on behalf of justice and truth. I made a film about the trip that you can find on YouTube called For Love of Husain. I walked the 50 miles over 2.5 days and touched the shrine of Husain. I participated in the rituals of mourning and made friends with people from Iraq, Iran, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia, just a few of the over 60 nations represented. These faithful Muslims, heeding the call of Husain to stand with the oppressed of the world, opened my mind and heart. What I came away with was a renewed sense so sorry. I came away with a renewed sense of hope for humankind. When a Christian pastor from America is showered with love and hospitality from Shia Muslims in Iraq and Iran, you can't help but be hopeful. I wish all Americans could share this experience of unity. A just peace is coming for all of earth. People get ready. My experience of Husain and my interaction with Shias has been that. I'm an American. My genealogy goes back a long way. I'm white. I'm privileged. I'm very privileged. So I can say the things I'm going to say just right now. I tell my church all the time I don't care what happens to the church. What I care about is that I'm 57. My granddaughter Pippa is 2. What will the world be like when she is 57? And not only her, but all 2-year-olds around the planet. And we live in a nation, Dwight Eisenhower said in 1961, he warned us of the military-industrial complex. This is my bottom line. I'm just telling you where I'm at. You can decide if I'm on your team or not. And he warned of that we will become a military that will be economic and we have to worry about it. It is magnified by orders of magnitude now. It's a military, industrial, intelligence, finance, media complex. The New York Times and the Washington Post have not met a war it's never liked. Everything we have is aspect of this. Caitlin Johnstone is an Australian author. She said, Americans are the most propagandized people on the planet. We have, in a sense, we're free, but on the other hand, we are propagandized into continuing to support war, and part of that is Islamophobia. Islamophobia makes money, and it feeds this complex. And so when I experienced Arba'in and Husain, and I saw these people walking and mourning and lamenting, catharsis, I'm sure, the suffering of the world, the suffering of Husain and injustice, and when I recognized that she are oppressed, and it's not that I like you because you're oppressed, but you're oppressed because you stand up for what is right. You resist this ongoing militarism and this ongoing injustice, and you're the people we need to stand with, and you have a gift. Imam Husain is a gift to the world. And I'm a Christian, and he does mirror Jesus to me. And I'm sorry for being so tearful. I didn't really expect this at all. But I want you to know that you are a minority, but you're a minority with a message. And that is the place to be. Don't sacrifice that to be famous or to get heard in whatever it might be. You have a message of a minority to be proud of and to be shouted from the rooftops in whatever form it takes. And so, I bless you. I'm happy to know you, and I'm happy to be a part of this ongoing thing. And I hope that is a part of what the message is of Imam Husain. Thank you.
So this is what happens when you take somebody from a Christian or a Sunni community to Arbain. So how many of you have been to Karbala? Please raise your hand. And I think there should be a tax to this. Anybody who goes more than 3 times to Karbala has to next time, 4th time, take somebody who is not a Shia. I'm just putting this figure out. You know, it's not easy. But say to yourself that, because we see a lot of people going to Umrahs every year for the last 30 years. Nothing changes. So I think we don't want to fall in the same trap. I think promise yourself that, you know, you will, and Kashif has already spoken about this, and this is his passion, to take some non-Shias and Christians and Sunnis and with you. So please, this is the result, because you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is to take somebody to show them. We have the biggest, I mean, this is not the perfect example to give, but you know, everybody watched Disney cartoons when we were young, right? But actually, when you go to Disneyland, it's different, right? So, I mean, there is something when you go there, it happens to you. And that's not up to us. Our job is to just get out of the way. We are the biggest hurdle because we think we own Imam Husain. And I was saying this in the other session, that last year when me and Kashif, we went to Karbala, we saw this so many Sunnis, buses after buses after buses, sitting in Bairul Haramain. Kashif actually sat with them and listened to what they were beautiful. And I said to him jokingly, I said, you know what, I'm very jealous. I thought Imam Husain belongs to us. How come they have come on the buses and taking over? So I think we are the problem. Thank you so much.
All right, if I may just say a few words here. As the Reverend, may God bless him, was speaking, I was reminded of the verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verses 82 and 83, in which God speaks about those who are most loving towards the believers. And then God specifically says, those who say we follow the one from Nazareth, because they include priests and monks who submit to the truth. And when they hear God's verses, you see their eyes overflowing with tears. And as he's speaking, I can fully picture these 2 verses coming into effect. So subhanallah, may God bless you, Reverend. And I think that as you were saying, he represents those who see the beauty, the sheer beauty of Imam al-Husain, and can't help but fall head over heels in love with it. Most of us, I guess we're privileged to have grown up in this culture. We've heard the name of Husain being whispered in our ears from the moment of our birth, but we kind of grow sort of complacent, and it becomes a recurring theme, and so we forget the fact that this is a truly universal message that has to be shared and has to be spread. Again, the idea isn't to proselytize, the idea isn't to convert people, but the idea is to share the fact that there is a person called Husain. And this Husain, one of the reasons when you visit the shrine of Imam Husain is we recite what's called Idhnul Dukhul. And Idhnul Dukhul literally means to get permission to enter. And that permission includes you saluting the prophets, beginning with the prophet Adam all the way down to Jesus, and then asking God for permission, because God is the custodian, he's the guardian of the sacred mausoleum of Imam Husain. But the mere fact that you mention those prophets means that there is an arterial thread that connects the message of Imam Husain to all of God's previous messengers. So I think that's really important. Another point I'll mention about that specific question, sister, which might be a bit controversial, and that is that, and that's kind of implied in your question, which is, are we trying to justify our identity by quoting, Western writers and authors and personalities and whatnot? And I think that there's nothing wrong with this, because if you're able to familiarize a non-Muslim audience with Imam al-Husain by quoting someone that they hold in high esteem, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem I find is that most of the people that we quote, lived about 200 years ago. And that's kind of upsetting. Like, if I were a non-Muslim, I'd be like, what have you been doing over the last 200 years? Why don't you have like present-day Nobel laureates talking about Imam Husain? Why don't you have like the Secretary General of the United Nations or Barack Obama or whatever, you know? People who are famous today, as opposed to Charles Dickens and Thomas Carlyle and Gandhi, whose quotes are questionable. Like I haven't really found an authentic quote attributed to Gandhi about Imam Husain. What I found is what I read in the Arabic literature. And so maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but that's not the point. The point is a 16-year-old girl here in DC can't really relate to Gandhi any more than she can relate to Imam al-Hussein. So again, going back to your question, can we not introduce Imam al-Hussein on his own merits? Does Imam al-Hussein lack enough slogans and chants and sermons and quotes and stances that are so close to everybody's heart that we have to resort to other people? So I don't think it's problematic in any way. I just feel like sometimes we lose sight of the actual message of Imam al-Hussein, and so we resort to others.
What you felt right there was what I would describe as a revolution, a small revolution. Tears, feelings, pain, understanding, being worried about the future. That's revolution. And that's what Imam Husain is about. It's about revolution. And I want you to join me on this one. It's very simple. You have to just say Husain. Revolutions by this name. This is called the love of revolutions by this name. This is called the love of. This is called the love of Husain. Understand with the blood of Husain, revolutions are raised. No matter how much we are oppressed, his name is forever praised. When Husain's love was brought to us, into its eyes we all gazed and thanked the Lord for blessing us with such light in our days. Can his lovers be ashamed? This is called the love of Allah. This is called the love of Husain. Salawat.
Thank you so much, everyone. These last two questions are related, so I will pose them both together. And inshallah, we can wrap up in about 10 minutes. I apologize for going over time. But the fourth question is, what are the most important factors in the content we create to promote the message of Imam Husain alayhi salam and the Ahl al-Bayt more broadly? What should we root our message in? What should we root our content in? What should our goals be in creating this content? Are we just seeking to create awareness? Are we trying to spark people's interest in the narrative more? And what advice or tips can you share with smaller grassroots Shia organizations, artists, young entrepreneurs who are seeking to spread their message online?
All right, so I will say this. It's a bit of a shameless plug here, but I think the work that Ahlul Bayt TV has done over the last 10 years is incredibly important. I mean, the channel came to the scene when there was no other Shia, English-speaking Shia TV channel existed. And one of the things we did from day one was we brought in presenters who were mostly reverts, and we tried to limit the viewers' exposure to black and white turbans as much as possible, and just have as many people who are more relatable to the general public to present our shows. And one of the things that the channel did quite successfully was produce cutting-edge documentaries about whether it be the pilgrimage of Arba'een or the shrine of Imam Husain, or how non-Muslims can relate to Imam Husain, and speaking to religious leaders about Imam Husain. So there's a whole host, hundreds of hours of documentaries produced specifically about the subject of Imam Husain, some of which has had millions of views on YouTube. I mean, I think the channel's YouTube channel has over 35 million views, so which is great. So cutting edge media, I think, can go a long way. I mean, you can cram into an hour-long documentary the contents of 10, 15, 20 books, right? And it's quite telling when you see a nun, for example, talking about her experience in Karbala. It's a very powerful message. It resonates with a lot of people. So I think that's something that's doable. You don't even have to have your own TV channel to do that. You can produce documentaries nowadays very cheaply. It really doesn't require a lot of money. What it does require is some creativity and willingness to go the extra mile and to put in the work, right? The first documentary the channel produced was called Karbala When the Skies Wept Blood. And that was produced with a budget of $2,000. And I think it was a team of 5 people that got together. I donated the camera, and everything else they did on their own. And they sold over 100,000 DVDs. This is back in 2006, I think. 2005, 2006, 100,000 DVDs of this documentary, because there is such a thirst for it. I know a brother also a revert, who lives in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, and he produced a stop-motion film with Lego bricks about Imam Husain. The story of Karbala, the entire maqtal, with stop-motion videos. And then he asked me to do the voiceover for Imam al-Husain, which was an incredible honor, and I did. He's now in the final stages of producing the cartoon. He did it in his garage completely on his own, using an old, terrible quality camera and a Lego set. You can do that, is what I'm trying to say. You can really become creative and do things to spread your message across, inshallah. And I'll finish with this Bible verse, if I may. And I ask the Reverend for his permission to do so. When I go to Arba'een, brothers and sisters, and going to ziyarah is incredibly important. You can talk all about it, you can read all the books, but actually going, Imam Sadiq says, "Muru shi'atana bi ziyarati qabr al-Husayn." Command our followers to visit the shrine of Imam Husain, because you'll never be the same person when you get back. Never, ever. And so, when I went to ziyarah the first time, I was reminded of a verse in the Bible in the book of Matthew. And the verse says, the reason I thought of it was because I saw, you know how people go from outside of Iraq and they carry their national flag, right? So you see all kinds of flags of people marching. And when I saw that, I was reminded of the verse. And the verse says that then appeared another sign in the heavens. The Son of Man came, and all the nations of the world were mourning. And I thought I'm not saying this is an interpretation of the verse, but I'm saying this is the next best thing. All of the nations of the earth are represented here in Karbala, all of them mourning for Imam al-Husain. And if we can get that message far and wide, we can contribute to that prophecy happening, inshallah.
They say that a picture says more than 1,000 words, right?
It's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, worth 1,000 words. Well,
Abraham Lincoln, by the way.
Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah.
Oh. Wasn't
I thought it was
George
Gandhi.
Washington, maybe? Yeah, maybe George Washington. But I say that a song, track, call it whatever you want, Latmiya Nohe can say more than 1,000 pictures. So people like me.
Everyone will disagree.
I say, not Abraham Lincoln this time. People like me need support. We need support. We need your support. We need you to go on YouTube, to go on those social platforms and find our productions. We spend a lot of energy, efforts, and money on producing these things. And it's not just like writing anything, just putting it out there. It's actually something that gets produced over a year. Inshallah, this year we will have an album out in English, fully English. Urology album, and last year we had one for Mullah Ammar al-Nashid, which I produced. It's called Again Here, and you can all go on YouTube and find it. If you write Ammar al-Nashid Again Here, you will be able to find it. It's very simple. So I'm just asking you for your support, and I hope, inshallah, that you will give me that by a like, by a sharing, by listening. That's how you can support us artists. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
So this is actually a question to Sayyid and yourself, brother. And this is for our young audience, basically I'm asking, that how do you make these projects financially viable? Not only financially viable, but actually providing for the livelihood. Because this is a crucial concern of the young people, right? They are in medicine or engineering or media, but at the end of the day, they have to bring food to the table. These things cost time and effort. And I think, yes, I mean, love of Imam Husain, we do lots of things, but I think if you do them in a way that it helps both ways, so how would you, like, first of all, I want to know that what kind of finances people are looking at. I don't want to put a figure, but it's doable, whether it's doable or not, and whether it can be profitable or not, that's one question. Second, just a comment that, you know, when we were doing this Imam al-Hujjah hospital in Karbala, we thought, a lot of Shia doctors and nurses and medical students approached us and said, we want to help, we want to help. And the problem happens when, you know, good intentions are good, but at the end of the day, there has to be some accountability as well. So what happens is if you get a lot of volunteers coming doing the work, but when you, for example, do not a good work, and if you go and question that person, that, for example, a patient or a surgery or a complication, and you say, why did that happen, and why didn't you do this in this fashion where it should be done, then it becomes a very difficult relationship because somebody has come to do this voluntarily. So then we decided, I think we should be dealing with people professionally and should be, whatever nominal amount, they should be compensated because we should be able to question or have some accountability. So these are two, first, I just want to ask both of you, because both of you have experience in the media, just for the consumption of young people.
Sure, inshallah. So, I'll give you two examples. We did this video last year called To Shake or Not to Shake. And it's about, some of you are nodding, so I guess you've watched it. It's about Muslim men and women not shaking hands with the opposite gender. And it's, you know, it's filled with memes and jokes and whatnot, and it's, you know, kind of appealing. And I did it with the help of two other guys, and it didn't cost us a thing, right? Because it's just a YouTube video, right? There's not much, there's not, you know, you don't have a lot of consumables, you're not, you do it in your spare time. So it took us a while to produce, I'd say about 2 weeks. And in my experience, every minute of a high quality documentary requires about 10 man-hours of work, right? So the fact that the Reverend, God bless him, has produced this documentary means that there, I mean, you can't tell when you watch the documentary, it's just an hour-long thing. But the fact is, it takes a lot of work, a lot of you know, time and effort and sometimes money, especially if you're doing it on location, in order to produce it. It's not just a talking head in front of a camera. So you can produce things very cheaply in your own garage and achieve great results, and hopefully with maybe a plug or a bump from Mahdi Modaressi, you can get it to go viral. But if you want to do things that are high quality and that get picked up by the network televisions and whatnot, then you're talking about a lot of money. And the way I look at it is this. I mean, with Ahlul Bayt TV, for example, I always say to people, if you become members of this organization by donating $10 or $15. I mean, that's how much we pay for our Netflix accounts. I know a lot of people steal the logins of their friends and siblings and whatnot, but there are someone, somewhere has to pay for that. And for the cost of a membership with Netflix or Hulu or whatever services there are out there, you can become members of these organizations. There is a thing called Patreon, and on Patreon you can support people that you like, people that you think are doing good, meaningful work. And unfortunately, Muslims are not there, Shias are not there. But you have people who are making a lot of money so that they can focus on those projects, right? If a project like the documentary produced by our good friend, the Reverend, is not given the support that it requires, it obviously means that him and people like him will have to, make too many sacrifices to be able to do these things, right? So these projects need the support. Money makes the world go round, and for all the good intentions that you've been talking about, at the end of the day, I say to people, if you want to do these things, make sure you don't quit your day job, because unfortunately the mentality in our community is, oh, it's free, let's just get it bootleg, let's just copy it, oh, fi sabilillah. Someone came up to me in New Zealand and said, Sayyid, I got a question about something. And so I said to her, you know what, I've actually addressed this question in my book, and it's on Amazon. And she's like, well, could you say, how much is it? I said, we sell it literally at cost price, $6. We don't make any money off of it. She said, but do you have a PDF version that you can email me? That's the mentality in our community. And if that's the case, the people who do these projects are truly special individuals who don't care about the money, who are willing to sacrifice their time and effort. And that's even more reason to support them, inshallah. Thank you.
That was so relevant and beautiful, because that kind of talks my pain out.
My pain's bigger, man.
Yeah, of course.
The channel needs $1 million a year.
Yeah, ahsant. Well, I was in Australia 2,000 years, 2 years ago, not 2,000 years ago. 2 years ago. I was really picky when it came to the audio. I wanted the microphone to be like this and the speaker to be like that and this and that. And the guys were like, "Bro, we're just volunteers, man. Just get it done." And I'm like, "You're bringing me from Denmark to Australia to do a performing, so it has to be good. It has to be acceptable at least." And they were like, "No, man." And then there was a guy. He's a reciter. He was like, "I have an album, and in my album, the beat on the bottom, it's off. I produced it, and by mistake it came off, but we don't care. It's for Imam Husain." And that made me so angry. Because when I was 8 years old, I was in the mosque in Copenhagen. I was helping with the audio. I was taking a cable and putting it up. So I just took it from this corner to that corner. It looked really bad. And then the guy who was in charge, he came to me and was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Cable." He goes, "Yeah, but why did you put it like that?" I was like, "And so what's from Imam Husain? It's just khidmah. It's just to volunteer." And then he goes, "If that was your home and Imam Husain would come in to see that, would you do it that way?" And then I went silent and I didn't know what to answer. So, and I told the reciter that story, and he also went silent, because these things has to be done perfectly good for you to feel the replacement. For example, when it comes to what we call haram music, if you want to listen to a track that's going to give you that satisfaction and maybe relating feeling to it and to the Islamic part of it, it has to be done in a really good and professional way. And that costs a lot of money. I'm going to give you one example I did as a volunteering. It's a song called Ramadan Shahrullah, and we made it to build a school in Syria. And the video cost $5,000. We filmed it in Beirut, And the song, only the strings in the song, they cost $3,000. And producing the song with 1,000, I wrote it and I produced half of it, so that took half of the cost. But it ended up by me using about $10,000. But because we did it so perfectly, and I sent it from one guy to another, I wasn't satisfied with the result. It ended up at Tony Haddad. Tony Haddad is the head of Dolby Digital in Lebanon. He's the one who mixes for movies, for big movies, big budget movies. And he mixed the song, and I got it, and I was satisfied. And I released it 2 months after. We gathered about $120,000 and we built the school with a pool to the kids, to the orphans. So, thank you. So, what I'm trying to say here is that if you support people who do these things, probably, like the channel, for example, you will get a result that will give a result. That's how it is. Thank you so much.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much for all our panelists. I'll just echo what they said, that yes, it's important to do things with precision. It's important to do things with ihsan. There's a hadith by Imam Ali alayhi salam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that if one of you is to do something, he do it with perfection. He do it with precision. So it's definitely important to do these, to undertake these endeavors with precision, but that can only come with the support of the community. And as, just to echo what my esteemed panelists were saying, you know, we're so quick to drop money on Netflix or on Kylie Jenner's eyeshadow or things like this, silly, frivolous things, but for some reason we become hesitant when our money is going to support our Muslim artists and those in our community who are undertaking artistic endeavors for the sake of Islam. So let us go forward with that in mind and with a spirit of generosity towards our brothers and sisters who are undertaking these important endeavors. And with that, I thank you so much to our panelists. You gave us so much wisdom and insight in these few hours, I suppose, that we spent together. And I do believe that this is the last session in Ummah 2019. So thank you so much to all the audience members for persevering through that long but hopefully beneficial session. Thank you so much to all the organizers. And inshallah, we will see you in the best of health and well-being next year. And thank you so much to everyone. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.